Dear viewer, thank you so much for watching this program. I'm Eric Biantuadi, a senior journalist based in West Africa. Today, I'm going to bring a special guest, a political analyst. We will talk about the election in the Republic Democratic of Congo. So my guest is Monte MC Merci. Monte MC Merci, thank you so much for your time. This is an opportunity for us to have you as a political analyst to debate on on a DRC election. Can you give us a little bit your background so that we can go straight to our program?
I have spent at least 30 years in post-conflict development assistance under the aegis of the United Nations, USAID, the Canadian Development Organization, and now for the past 10 years, I have been affiliated with a private university in Kinshasa, which has allowed me to learn and to share. Notwithstanding, the more I know, the less I understand. And yes, I do understand a bit about Africa. And I'm more than willing to share what little thoughts I have, and I thank you, sir.
Let us start by African elections. We know that in the recent year, most of the African countries, especially in West Africa, most of them are really trying to move forward when it comes about their relationship between them and some colonialism. And what you have to say about that transition? How African democracy are trying to move forward?
It's several steps forward and many steps backward. It is a long-term progress. And for me, what I have gained in terms of insights, which is what I term learned knowledge over many years of reflection, making mistakes, and learning from mistakes. And let me just do a shout out for former President George Weah of Liberia, who following the election recognized and respected the results and relinquished power without any form of internal or external appropriation. And for that, Liberia is on the way forward. Notwithstanding that, of course, Liberia is suffering an economic collapse. And we can go into that, and DR Congo is not much difference. And yes, with elections, and Zimbabwe, where I have spent time with in the past, and watching the most recent elections in Zimbabwe, and unfortunately, I was forbidden to enter the country for reasons best left unknown. And all I'm going to comment, and I have written about this, I've expressed about this, is what I term local national empowerment. The richest resource in Africa is people, individuals like you. You are the treasure. And journalism is absolutely fundamental in terms of your professionalism. And I am absolutely humbled with what I have seen and witnessed in terms of what I term your courage, your professional expertise, and most importantly, your moral courage. Because I suspect that the oligarchs or the incumbent people are not enthusiastic about having their travails exposed.
Great. Thank you so much for all those great words. Monte, can you let us start deeply to the election for DRC Congo? As you may know, DRC Congo started to go to trouble since 1994 when the genocide of Rwanda started in Kigali. Most of the military, the army that was supporting the former president Abiyarimana, most of them fled to Congo DRC. And since that time, the Congo has always been in tough period, and the crisis has already interrupted in the eastern part of the Democratic Republic of Congo. So now the country is going has votes for a new elections, as you know as well, you may know. There was election, the passation of power that it's considering by the actual government of the Congo, the president Felix Tshisekedi, with all the local authority that was a democracy power, and international community also agreed that this was the way to democracy, to see the former president Joseph Kabila to hand over the power to Felix Tshisekedi, and this was a new era for Congo. And what you have to say about this election, what you saw, and how do you see this election going?
Let me reframe the question, which I agree and compelling. Let us go back to 1960, which was probably the last time that an elected leader was freely elected by the people of DRC, Patrice Lumumba. And we know what happened after that, that he was failed by all counts. Not that he was a perfect man, he was profoundly flawed, but he was never allowed to attenuate because he spoke with passion. And it goes back to when the King of Belgium came down to the opening and expected or anticipated that there would be generoustic bromides and saying, we are pleased, we are happy. And he had the temerity, Patrice Lumumba, newly elected prime minister, to speak truth to power. He called out the Belgians. He called them out harsh, a la Frantz Fanon, in terms of the wretched of the earth. And absolutely, the king was politely embarrassed, but he was appalled. He was stricken. And therein lay what I call the seeds of destruction, because Congo was at the epicenter of mineral resource extraction. The height of the Cold War, you had the polarization with Western imperialism, and you had the Soviet Union. And then you had DRC right in the middle of the conflict, just shortly after former Prime Minister Macmillan heralded the winds of change. And he was taken down in a most obscene manner. And today, Congo is still paying the price. And as you stated, 1994, with the Rwandan situation, with the Interarmée and with the individuals coming into Eastern DRC and aided, abetted by Kagame, who is himself a gangster, and he wants part of the pie because Rwanda is a small country, overpopulated, and I fail to understand how they're able to export multi-million dollars worth of minerals when Rwanda does not have any gold. It just begs it. And the East is a beautiful area, but subject to turmoil in terms of resource extraction. And Congo has never quite recovered in terms of what I call public administrative civics. You had Mobutu, who was at one time Lumumba's right-hand man, but enabled by the CIA, taken down. But that is important to understand and appreciate the antecedents leading up to what happened now. And later on, if we have time, I'll go into the 2018 election where I was involved, which resulted in the election of Potemkin elected, because we still don't know what the results were. But there was a deal cut. And now we are watching what is happening. And I recently left Congo to go back. I'm in Toronto in my basement bunker, and I will be back in Congo mid-January. These are interesting times, and CENI is part of the government. To say that CENI, the DRC election management body, is independent? No. Is it professional? Aspirationally. Is it ethically? It's ethically compromised. The costing of the election is approximately $1.2 billion. In 2018, I assisted in a small way with the Zeta election plan, where we detailed the elections. And this is going based when I was involved in Liberia running the first UN post-Taylor elections. And we costed the elections at that time at about $600 million. But of course, we ensured that there was not going to be what I call friction. That's another way in terms of corruption venality. Why were these elections so compromised in terms of logistics? They had 4 years in which to plan. I mean, they could have figured things out. To have an election in a country like DRC with what I call the miss aspects in terms of the compromise in one day, I would have suggested at least 2 days in terms of holding these elections and having the election materials brought in at least several weeks before, and then the sensitive materials, which are the actual ballots, they could have been brought in a week or several days before. And then, of course, training where you use the intellectual horsepower, the students, the tribal chiefs, in terms of enabling, because they know who is a citizen, who is duly living in the area, and then that would assist in the registration process. So it's difficult. And yes, I saw the CENI Central Command. It was almost out of Star Trek. It looked beautiful. And now, of course, what is happening? It's all gone quiet, waiting for the results. And by rights, as suggested before, the results should be dictated poll by poll, not going into central headquarters in terms of holding the count. And yes, I know we have election tourists aided by USA, and that's the only reason why they're there. They do marginal. In fact, what they do is they hobble the citizens of Congo, that you need to empower national civil society organizations. You need to empower people like yourselves, peoples of the media, to have free access to enter, to pose the questions, to pose the tough questions, to query, talk to the voters day before, and respect what I call the judicial limitations, that within the confines of the polling precinct, that you do not intimidate, you do not do anything. You allow the voter to be unimpeded to exercise his or her choice freely.
Great. So let me come back to something you just said. Uh, Tshisekedi or his government should take care of at least 4 years to prepare this election. Uh, Tshisekedi, when he came in the power, he was linked to Joseph Kabila party as a partners. You know, they have deal together that they should work together. That means, you know, when you want to become a big in a political, as a party, a political party, you need to be linked to another political party so that you can be strong in the parliament and the senatorial. And he has a lot of, this is what they think, he has a lot of challenge to decide because they has no control for the parliament and the senatorial. It took him almost like 2 years before he decided to recall the parliament and the senatorial to get control of those institutions. Do you think that is it's a good way to say that I was not able to decide or to get control of everything because I had like some many years I was not taking control of all those things?
I hear what you're saying and I respect your insights, which to a high degree are valid. But understand this clear. Congo is not ruled by the internal government. Felix Tshisekedi, whom I have met because his camp, or Etienne, was right behind the university, his compound, because his father was always campaigning, going on marches. And the only time that I had a chance was when the chancellor of the university that I'm affiliated with went in for a conversation with Etienne, the father of Felix. Felix sat quietly, and I'm going to be very, very polite. Felix is what I call a dim light bulb. He is not what I call the sharpest blade in the house. And politics is rough. And in Congo, it's extremely rough. There is just too much. And the idea with government, it's government push. It's government in the pocket. It's not calibrated to serve, to assist. And then you have the external interest. Even in Canada with our mining consortiums, Congo leadership is beholden to the external. And we can go into names, and I'm not going to go into all of them now, but you have the Baleares in terms of France, who control a great deal of the Cape. And it makes it very difficult for anyone to govern. And poor Felix, and I say that with the utmost sympathy. Did he have a choice? The elections in 2018 were fundamentally compromised. That as far as I'm going to go with the evidence that I know, because I'm not going to speculate. Even though Senko, where I was somewhat affiliated with in terms of we went around to check things out, there was something missing, because Chadre, who was Kabila's anointed, did so abysmal. They couldn't rig it that well. I mean, that was too far an overstep. And so we don't know who actually, Fayulu said he was the victor, whether he was or not. But the point is, there's too much unknown to suggest that he did not succeed. Chances are he was the victor. And Felix was the most amenable. And in terms of deals, not that I was in the room, I'm not. So everything I am doing is what I call hearsay, based on information that I've heard from students, from former faculty members, and in terms of gleaming over the time. Yes, there was a concordance. Joseph Kabila wanted to hold on to his gains. He did not want to lose. And the point is, he was there not running things because he preferred to run his motorcycles and just play around. Governing for him was not a preeminent occupation. And he wanted not to be entailed legally. So I suggest, and I suggest that there was some form of agreement. So Felix Tshisekedi, or Potemkin-elected President Tshisekedi, had a poison chalice. It was difficult. And then yet, in terms of dealing with the upper and lower houses, how do you forge a deal? And then yet, in terms of contracts, in terms of money, because you need to keep the generals quiet, so you need to pay them off. You need to keep your supporters quiet. You need to find them jobs. There is very little what I called formal employment in Congo. It's either unearned or you're with the government. And that, of course, is a motivator. And the government is the largest employer. And taxes, which are minimal to not. So there is the lack of what I call the social contract. Because if you're not paying taxes, what right do you have to be entitled to education and health care? Notwithstanding, that is a right. And government exists to serve and to assist. And Africa, or DR Congo, and I'm not going to go hall and mighty, because you look at the problems in the United States. We cursed Africa, or we cursed when we entered in, because they have the what I call the apparat. There's a French term, apparat, the apparateness of power, that you have elections, you have swearing in, but then it's a hollow. That is, it's over time, respect in terms of for the citizen, that you have dissent, that you have aspects where you listen, and then how do you serve? To say that Tshisekedi was imperiled, yes and no. But he could have broken, easier said than done, slowly. And one way would have been, I'm going to hold an election by right where the people are going to decide. It's going to be open, it's going to be transparent, and I'm going to empower national civil society. So that means I'm going to vest within the university or trade schools the citizens. I'm going to speak to the chiefs. Not directly, but I'm going to have my people, that they are going to be empowered, because that's also going to have what I call the umbrella of security. What do the people of Congo want? They want personal security, particularly in the East. Children to be unmolested to go to school, women to be unmolested when they walk to the fields to gain the water, to find the food, and the soldiers. The UN is not held in very high respect, and that goes back to 1960. And there's another aspect too. In a sense, the UN contracts for soldiers is not very much. To keep one Canadian private abroad is about $1 million, more or less the same for an American. To keep one Canadian general abroad is $1 million, give or take. It's the training, it's the infrastructure. They're well disciplined. Whereas you can have on UN contracts a great deal of Bangladeshis, Nigerians, Ghanaians going through, but they lack the discipline. That's part of the problem. And of course, the Canadian taxpayer is not going to say, well, we're not going to send 10,000 Canadian soldiers over there because we can't afford it. We can barely afford our own military. So that, and again, it's a cycle of despair. So the UN is also hobbled. They're doing the best they can with the limited resources. And it's profoundly, profoundly depressing. Who is suffering? The most precious resource, the young boy, the young girl. I am committed to female empowerment, gender neutrality, regardless of one's creed, sex, or bias, because that is long-term thinking. And development. U.S. aid is transactional, even though Samantha Power, the administrator, is trying to level the field. I came up with that when I was U.S. aid director in Liberia many years ago because I upset the Beltway bandits, because I had the temerity to empower nationals to do programs as opposed to going to subcontractors living in the United States. And that created a great deal of pressure. I am committed to national empowerment. And elections are only one veil, what I call the scion of civility. Because when elections are respected by the citizen, that gives the government a sense of legitimacy. And with legitimacy, you have power, or as the French would say, la puissance. And that is formidable. And the government of 2018 lacked that cardinal, ordinal element, legitimacy.
Great. So you say earlier, the election for 2018, there was a compromise. It was like a compromise elections. Do you think that Tshisekedi is irritated what he accepted or what he fight for today?
I don't know. The times that I have seen him, and this has all been either on television or within a large confines. I've not held any personal conversations with him because he's surrounded by his team of people. And they are the ones that wield the power. And there are several that don't even live in Congo. I'm not going to suggest that he's more or less told what to do. But when he speaks in a very mild, non-effacing way. And I don't know whether he has what is called traction. Because if he could have brought a sense of civility or calm in the East, he would be regarded as the savior of DRC. Notwithstanding that Paul Kagame is not assisting because he is trying to drive a spanner in the works because there is just too much wealth out there. And Kagame needs to be called out. And he is the one that wants to hobble Congo. And he's doing his ardent to ensure that there is instability. And that is going to keep the government structure in Kinshasa. Congo, as you know, is a large country. It's 2.5 hours by jet from Kinshasa to Goma and then down to Bukavu. That's a long distance. And Congo is bereft in roads. So in terms of traveling in the interior, it is challenging. And to hold an election, it is possible, but to do it with the constraints means that you're working right from the end of the last election right on to now. And I don't even look, and you look at what I call Command Central. As I said, it's almost being on the bridge of start of the Starship Enterprise. But to me, it's going to be how it's handled in terms of results, because they're not going to be announced until perhaps early in the new year. Are they going to be massaged? I don't know. But I'm sure that there are people that are watching very, very carefully, and they need to balance things out. Will it reflect the free, unencumbered vote of the citizen? It's going to be contingent on what I call several variables. What is the percentage of the population that actually voted? That, to me, is cardinal. That needs to be taken in. If it's a high voter turnout, that signifies well. And then how is the vote allocated? Because you have NGOs, national NGOs monitoring. What are they seeing and what are they hearing? I'm not paying too much attention to what I call the international election tourists, because that to me is just what I call just to show off what we're doing. And I mean, there's no credence, because to them, and I've said this to them, they're on a vacation. And I don't take away all that much, but they're receiving external monies, and how they're not going into the regions that you need to be in there for years in advance. You don't go in for days. You don't go in for months. You need to be there on the ground to feel, to understand, and then to build up trust. And elections, as I have said or written, are trust. They're not complicated. It's trust. You need to have trust in the organizing entity. You need to have trust that the vote is going to be counted properly. You're going to have trust that the vote is going to be extended in terms of recorded and then made public properly. If those three are adhered, then the results will be respected. The trust element is what I'm seeking, and that the word is still out. I'm not going to make any comment because I'm not even on the ground. I'm in my basement bunker in Toronto, and it's easy to say, but all I'm saying is I have the utmost respect for the people on the ground at each polling stations, that they're being poorly paid, they're poorly trained, and I was adamant. Training needs to start right from the last election, and you start with universities, the colleges, you empower the local chiefs to make them strong and that they bring in their people, and it's a cascade effect. And then by then you have the community that they understand what the election process is about. But that creates problems for what I call the central leadership in Kinshasa, because they may not like what's going to come out, because they're going to be hearing things they don't want in terms of education, healthcare delivery, because that is putting money into the state, not extracting out. Because the contracts that are made in terms of the international consortiums to say that they're egregious is being polite. It is an obscenity in terms of that all the leadership know how to do is to sign and how to spend. Kinshasa, if you've been there, I mean, the wealthy live well. They live arrogantly. And the majority of people, which comprises 99% of Kinshasa, which is a village of 12 million plus, live in abject poverty. And therein is the problem.
Great, great, great. So we are going deeply to this election. Let me come back to Paul Kagame. The Rwanda president had an interview with France 24. He said that the Rwanda is not to blame for what's happening in Congo. What do you think about this word? Do you think that I know that the international community now, the US and the international community, European Union, are now blaming Rwanda as a counterpart for Congo problem. Uh, what do you think should be the solution? The last word President Tshisekedi says last time, he says that there is a former president of the Commission Electoral of Independent during Kabila time. The name is Colonel Nanga, who has created a
Who is
movement
now in
called
exile.
the movement of Congo River. So the movement said that they should come to Congo to bring the democracy. So they have to come to bring the democracy. And today they are blame Kagame that be behind of this movement. What you have to say about that? As a journalist, we can't verify those statements, but the President Kabila said that Rwanda is not to blame for what's happening in Congo. And Kabila, Joseph Felix Tshisekedi said that enough is enough. If he's elected, he will declare the war with the Rwanda if Rwanda, this new movement created, the movement of Congo River, killed a single Congolese. What you have to say about that?
How did Kabila come to power after the death of his father, Laurent Kabila? How did Laurent Kabila come to power? With the aid of Rwanda in terms of the military moving in when Mobutu was faltering. And so you need to look at that. I mean, one can listen to President Kagame, but words and actions are different. And you need to go micro and look at the economy of Rwanda. And yet what they are exporting cannot come from Rwanda. Where are they getting it? How are they getting it? So something is not quite right. And yes, Rwanda abuts Eastern DRC. Rwanda, albeit beautiful, is a very small, heavily populated, heavily controlled country. And Paul Kagame does not take prisoners. And he will source them out in South Africa, as Michaela Wong expressed very, very well in her most recent book, which has been well documented. And there are people living in fear, even in Canada, with Kagame's agents coming out. And then you realize about the extradition of the gentleman who was thought he was going to one place and ended up in Rwanda and now was recently released. Paul Rusiyama.
Great. So now there is what we called insecurity in the eastern part of Democratic of Congo, and some area like in Ituri was not able to vote because of that insecurity. And more there is insecurity, more mineral resource and gold, coltan, cobalt, all those things are just flying from everywhere. So the government of Congo are also blame the East. I also blame the European Union and some powerful countries. Don't you see that Congo will also become a regional area where the most of powerful country will come to fight for to divide the Congo?
Put forward because there is just too much wealth and the administration is very, very weak. For me, leadership is that when things go wrong, I bear the responsibility. When things go right, all my subordinates receive the credit. That to me is one of the iron laws of leadership, of what I call effective leadership. I mean, many, many books have been written about leadership. And has Congo been blessed with good leadership? Right from the get-go, not. You can start with Patrice Lumumba, who is profoundly flawed himself. Notwithstanding, he was never given a chance. But he had the passion of the people. Mobutu, who had the greatest potential, went over in terms of became a kleptocrat. And then you had Laurent Kabila, who breached a deal with Rwanda, and whether he was taken out by that or whether it was over another matter, one does not know. And then you had Joseph Kabila, who actually was not a leader. All he enjoyed were the prerequisites of leadership and governance. He did not lead. He did not introduce anything proactive in terms of security in the East and allowed the East to suffer. And right now, it's become manifold. And Felix Tshisekedi, whether he's tried, but he is hobbled. I mean, it's not a question of just going in, that there is no security. The soldiers, in terms of discipline, it takes years, if not decades, to build up a cadre of sound administrators. And at the beginning, you surround yourself, at least what I always say, I try to surround myself with people that are more clever than me. I try to surround myself with people that tell me what I don't want to hear, so long as they justify it in fact-based evidence. That allows me to make what I term informed decisions. Felix, for whatever reason, was not allowed or did not allow. And it could have been in terms of pure pecuniary aspects that the external elements did not want to see a Congo thriving, did not want to see a Congo autonomous, because then they could not do what they would like to do for the cheap price, that they would be required to be responsible in terms of human resources, in terms of treating people with dignity, whether it be with pensions, health care, education, but that would eat into their profit. That is what they did not want. And Congo is suffering. And a 4 or 5 year term to solve it? Absolutely not. But did Felix Tshisekedi start? Again, the decision is out. I would say that he could have done more or he could have pushed back more. And these results are going to be interesting in terms of how they're going to be coming in and what the response is going to be. I will admit that the multi-number of people seeking the presidency is to the betterment of the incumbent. And as I said to Dr. Denis, why on earth are you running for president? Yes, you are a decent man. Yes, you are a Nobel laureate. But with all deference, you are not a good speaker. And you need to be a passionate speaker to bring up and all your good deeds. The best you could do, and I said this in my most humble way, is somehow to implore the government that if you are going to stand down, this is what you want in terms of not only your own clinic, what you want for the East. He, for whatever reason, whether he made the decision, did not do that. He is not going to do very, very well. There's just too much competition. And that is only in favor of what I call the incumbency, because the incumbency, they give out what I call small money prior to the election. Because I can remember signs going up about 2 years ago, extolling the virtues of President Felix. this wonderful man giving out milk, and you're using public resources years before an election for your own private attainments.
Great, great. So, how do you see the 5 year of Felix Tshisekedi? Do you think that if he can get the population can give him more 5 years, Felix Tshisekedi can bring some change in Congo in terms of security and development?
It will be contingent on the people that he decides to surround himself with. If he is elected, I'm not going to say reelected because I'm still holding out. If he is elected this time properly and it's vouched as being in his favor properly, notwithstanding the roilings in the East, and that goes to what I call the veil of legitimacy, which to me I take very, very seriously. It's how he conducts himself in his first few weeks. If he's going to say, I'm going to turn the page, I am going to govern truly as an instrument of the people, as a humble servant, and I'm going to document how the resources are going to be allocated in terms of what I call public administrative metrics. And I'm going to ensure that monies are going to be dedicated to healthcare and to education, particularly among the under youth, and then in healthcare, because you want to have a healthy population. And I'm going to insist that when any external element come in to mine our resources, they're going to employ Congo people, and they're going to be held to a standard in terms of how you treat the workers, with respect and dignity, in terms of pay, and in terms of occupational safety, in terms of injury, that they're going to be looked after if they're injured on the job, and the employer will be taken or being held responsible. That will be interesting. And if he starts to do that, I'm going to say, hands off to you, Mr. President, more power to you. I would rather do small, small well as opposed to large, large nothing. A nothing burger is nothing. I would rather take small of something.
Great. So, Machi, you've been in country like Liberia, which came out from the war for a long period of war, and Liberian tried to work hard to fix his democracy. And today, Liberia, we can account the country among some of the democratic country. Uh, what do you think did not went well with the 5 years of Tshisekedi, and what will be your advice that if it can be win, that can fix?
He will need to take, Felix Tshisekedi will need to take a look at himself in terms of what I call his moral virtue or moral character, and saying, I am an instrument of the people, and have what I call the courage to speak the truth, saying, I'm not going to be your puppet. I'm not going to be your marionette. I am Congolese. I am president of the Democratic Republic of Congo, and I have been given a mandate to serve, not to steal, not to aid, not to abet the internationals. And if he can do that, I believe it's going to be unlikely, but I'm hoping, and I'm hoping these words are the message. So I'm also speaking to you, sir, but I'm also speaking to a larger population. And that is the power of media, which is why Tshisekedi or his people have tried to diminish the media, because they don't want the media interfering too much what they call internal affairs. A strong media is one of the central pillars of what I call a sound, robust democracy. Because if there is no media, democracy becomes cloudy and black. It's people like you and all the people that you work with are the true instruments, that you share, you serve, and you speak the truth, and you try to document that. You're not always perfect. I'm a flawed individual. I'm not always right, but at least I know what I don't know, and I'm humbled as to how little I do know, which I'm not afraid to express, my total ignorance. And that is my aspect. And if I were to say to Mr. Felix Tshisekedi, is humble yourself. In humility, you grow strong. And the people will say that, in a sense. And then the people around you, because I'm sensitive, because they have lived, and it's my turn to eat. And I have been with you. If you don't empower me, I'm not going to be suffering to you. I'm going to make your life difficult. So there's that balance. And there, in a sense, it's very, very difficult because the pillars of what I call the administrative institutions are very, very weak. And therein is part of the problem, because in terms of the courts, you have the Constitutional Court. But is the Constitutional Court independent? Highly unlikely, because they serve at pleasure. And if they make a ruling which is contrary to what the express wish of the executive, I suspect that their livelihood would be very much encumbered. So that creates a veil too. And the legal profession in Congo is, in a sense, it's à la poche. I mean, in terms of precedent, it's whoever has the most power, which makes it difficult for West to invest, because in terms of property rights, there are no property rights. It's whoever has the strongest gun or squatter's right on terms of property. There's not what I call instruments in terms of conveyance. This all goes to what I call institutions.
Great. So the opposition are accusing Felix Tshisekedi's power, 5 years past the power, to be more involved in the corruption. There was no a proper justice. So we had people who has been accused for stealing money, robbing money, and today there are some of them also even working in the government, and that's what opposition say. And there is also the anti-robbery, anti-corruption institution who stand up and say that Tshisekedi government should work hard on to fix those two problems: corruption and justice. So when we talk now about the opposition, the key opposition face, I talk about Denis Mukwege. You just said something earlier. You said, Mukwege, my advice, you are not good speaking. And we have also Moise Katumbi. We have Martin Fayulu, who was, according to him, is a party that was the winner for the election of 2018. And we have also we have Martin Fayulu, and we have Felix Tshisekedi, we have Moise Katumbi. What's your analysis about those opposition key person, Martin Fayulu, Moise Katumbi, and Denis Mukwege?
The first two are well financed. They have a good infrastructure which allows them to deliver their message, and also the goods to, how does one say, make the population more amenable to their candidates, or in terms of, I'm talking about Fayulu and I'm talking about Moise. Those two have well-funded campaigns, whereas Dr. Denis, he's more of a regional individual and a very good man, a decent man, and he represents the values. He's much like a Nelson Mandela. And Mandela's greatest failure was that he did not understand the instruments of governance. It did not bother himself with the instruments of governance. And now you see what happened with his two successors. And the last one just does not even bear recognition. Talk about corruption. That the ANC is literally on the verge of losing government status because the people are so dissatisfied, and has nothing to say against Mandela, who suffered, but he did not take seriously what I call the daily quotidian tasking in governance. Governance is difficult. Governance is not going to international meetings, is not cutting ribbons. Governance is dealing with the details, is dealing with your subordinates, it's dealing with the economy, it's making tough choices in terms of who to appoint, in terms of local chieftains, local governance, and saying no to people. That is all very, very difficult. And in places like Congo, it can be actually hazardous to one's health. And I say this not lightly. And so, as I said, Dr. Denis, I don't expect him to do all that well. The other two have effective campaigns. They are well financed. And this is where it's going to be interesting in terms of vote. What are the people thinking? And I hear different elements, and you take that into account. And are they happy with the status quo? They hear all these good words. Congo is in need of what I call a radical shift, of a leader who is prepared to roll up his sleeves. I'm not saying her sleeves because that's unlikely in the first in this election, but I'm always optimistic in the future. I remember Erilyn Sirleaf. We shared many a conversation, and she herself was flawed and had flawed people around her. But as she said, what can I do? The point is, I am hobbled, enabled. I need to give something, otherwise I can't survive. And it makes it difficult because a country like Liberia is not blessed absolutely with natural resources. They have some coming online, but is hobbled economically and requires long term. And that's why I say a shout out to President Weah. He retired with grace. And yes, he had private money earned from football, but he still retired. He said, yes, I had my run and I'm clearing out, which is good for Liberia. That allows him to go on to the next step. So I'm hoping that the new president-elect will then understand that, being the former vice president, to take the reins of power and to be slow, judicious, and not appoint merely friends, and actually try to do something and recognize that Liberia is a failed state. Congo is a failed state. And a failed state means that nothing is working. But the potentiality for Liberia is actually greater than Congo because Liberia is smaller. And they could make a proper address to the IMF if they are willing to subscribe to the strictures that the IMF may and will impose. Congo is in a different class. Congo's potential is awesome. Congo can be the player in Africa because of geographic and also because of size. And that scares many other nations. And I'm not even going into tourism, constructive tourism. I'm telling you to take a boat up the Congo River as opposed to a gunboat and to explore Congo. That is a total treasure, but it needs to be done constructively. And then, of course, you have the jungle, one of the lung of Africa, second only to the Amazon. We need those natural resources to be preserved and protected. And then you go into Virunga in terms of the east. And I've had the privilege of going up there several times. It's breathtaking. But that, again, is an untapped resource. Congo has so much to offer. Congo, as with most African countries, this is what I call what we in the West have left Africa. We have left them with the governance curse. And it's easier, again, said and done. And I will quote again Frantz Fanon. He was impassioned, he was inspired, but he was blunt. And I mean, when he said take them out, he meant take them out, because you need to have creative destruction, to go with Joseph Schumpeter from an economic term, that you need to start up from the ashes. But where are the good people? They exist. I've met with many of them. I've talked to them. And when they rise, they have two choices. You either accept the monies from the government and be quiet, or we are going to push you out. And the few that have elected, we're not going to take your money, they have been pushed. They have been dealt unjustly, harshly. And that makes it very, very difficult. And there have been tears coming down my eyes when I've witnessed what is happening. And when you see young women, I mean, trying with the creative expression. All of Africa is creative. I mean, you are blessed with creativity. Jazz came from Congo via New Orleans. And when Louis Armstrong played in Congo in 1960, he said, I am back to my roots. And that was at the time when things were just unraveling. Aided and abetted by the United Nations, aided and abetted by the United States, and then Belgium coming in. Congo has never recovered from what I call that unmitigated disaster of 1960. And again, don't let me say that Lumumba was perfection personified. He was a profoundly flawed, troubled man, but he just did not have the resources to allow him to gain his footing because he wanted to help the people. He just didn't know how. There was the infrastructure, the administrative infrastructure that was denied him, and then he was taken out.
Great. So, last question regarding the opposition figure. Do you see a potential, a powerful man by seeing Moise Katumbi and Martin Fayulu, if a chance can come to one of them to elect this election, if one of them can beat Felix Tshisekedi, do you see which potential you see in each one of them?
I mean, Moise has a lot of family money that he made a great deal when he was governor of Katanga, and he's using those resources. To say that he earned it himself, that would be somewhat specious. And Fayulu to a lesser degree, because he was a senior executive with a petroleum company. And I suspect that he would be more amenable to having administrative infrastructure introduced on objective considerations. And that is a segue in terms of what I call Western expertise. I take that notionally. You need to listen, but you don't want them telling you what to do. You want them to provide what I call rough general guidance, allowing nationals to fail and to fail again and to fail better, as the playwright Samuel Beckett said, fail, fail again, fail better. And that is the stricture that I subscribe to. I remember sharing beers at the Mamba Point in Monrovia with Paul Collier, who wrote The Bottom Billion. He was in the midst of writing the book, The Bottom Billion, at Oxford, economics professor, and sharing conversations and, in a sense, why it's failing long term. And then I'm not even going to go into $3 trillion wasted in Afghanistan. All the people that died in Afghanistan, you may as well just line them up and shot them for what has resulted. If you do it once and you do it right. It's long term. You don't dictate. And that goes into Iraq, that complete debacle where America lost its virtue in democracy.
Great. So what about Martin Fayulu? What about Martin Fayulu?
I suspect he has the capacity, the potential to grow the office of the presidency. I believe he has the capacity to grow the public administrative infrastructure. I believe he has the capacity to bring on people, nationals, and to balance them off with external advisors, but to rely on nationals. I believe he has the capacity and potential to start off, not necessarily with a tabula rasa, but to say that I'm going to start clean. What is past, and make whatever side deals you make, because you don't want to have a bunch of disparate. Because with Kabila, I would have cut a deal with him that he needs to declare publicly all the monies he has taken, him and his family, because he was a taxi driver. And if he does that, he will then be allowed to keep some of it, not to live in abject poverty, because that's not good. I mean, he would not be required to have any judicial reckoning. That would be my suggestion. And that's what I would suggest if given a room, if Martin Fayulu were to ask me, not that he will, but that's what I would suggest to him. And with Moise, he's a little more encumbered. I mean, he wants power because he enjoys power. He is basically a Tshisekedi with brains. That's how I would categorize him. And being brains and being venal, that's a dangerous proposition.
Thank you so much for those words. I think Moise Katumbi and Martin Fayulu, they will have a chance to watch this program. They will get some advice from you. Okay, the vote has happened in 20 December. We are under vote results now. The preliminary votes results are coming. Congo organized this election regarding borrowing money for the election. Billion of money has been taken from the government, the government money to organize these elections. What do you have to say about how the election went? We know that there is a huge irregularity that people say, some activists and international observers that say that there is also some problem that's happened in some bureau.
I'm going to be looking through the prism of my 30 years plus involved in elections in Africa, in Eastern Europe, and in Afghanistan. So I'm going to put it through a prism. There is no such thing as a perfect election, not even in my country, Canada. All elections are flawed. It's to the degree that the flaw exists. There is a point where it's beyond that it lacks legitimacy. Congo is, as I said, a very large country. Its infrastructure in the interior is very, very weak, making it very challenging. I will say, and I will go on record, the late Chancellor Zita, with small assistance by myself, prepared an election plan, a document of 100 pages, and we costed out the 2018 elections at approximately just under $700 million. And of course, when it was presented to the cabinet, the fury that emanated was just raw and feral, and went right to the Congo National, Stephen Zita, who never quite recovered, because they recognized that was a powerful, powerful document, and they refused to accept it. Because elections can be done, and as I've said, you need to start early, and you need to involve a lot of people, and you train, and you cascade. And it all needs to be clear, open, and transparent. And what is absolutely critical, the leadership of the CENI cannot be in any manner, direct or indirect, entailed within the governance structure. It needs to be professional, ethical, and absolutely neutral. Service to the citizen voter. No more, no less. All the government can do is look at the budget, provide them with the resources, and it's all subject to what I term forensic accounting, which sadly has not been done this time because there is friction. I mean, there's what I call reasonable friction, because human nature being human nature, and there are extraordinary circumstances, but there's just too much money that's not accounted for, whether it's with the voting machines that fail, that voting booths don't open up, and that can be configured into the system. And you do that, and there are just different ways. You pay them what I call a decent amount of money, and it's all relative, instead of paying external sources. And you have them on the spot well in advance, and they need to be local. And that is cardinal, local, from the village, known by the chief, and you involve the local leaders. They need to be right involved from the get-go. You need to empower them. When they're empowered, they feel strong. And then they are more motivated to help you, what I call the EMB, the electoral management body. And they have an idea who is eligible to vote or not, and that would make voting registration a lot more efficient and effective and reduce the cost. That was not done, and that is creating problems. You don't even know who is voting or eligible to vote. And as you ably or aptly pointed out, in the East, it's very difficult to see who voted. And I'm going to be looking at the numbers in terms of voter turnout, and there's what I call the test of what is reasonable. And if it does not meet the test of what is reasonable, I'm going to be viewing those results with a great deal of lack of certitude. And I mean, the presidency, they are in there. They're watching the results right now. That I can say, and that will go on record. They know exactly what's coming in. And if there's going to be any tweaking, it's going to be done at the central headquarters. And to mitigate that, the result should be public at the end of the count at each polling station. And then each party, and many of the candidates do have local people, attested by neutral people and by the chiefs. And that is how I would have designed the system, to make it value neutral. But then again, that only means that the result is going to be credible, but that may impede the election of the incumbent president. And of course, what is the role of any elector? Once you are elected, you want to calibrate to be reelected. It's everywhere. It's universal. It's a norm of what I call a public civics. And so I'm sanguine right now. And as I look at the Starship, the Enterprise, I mean, that is one clean, good-looking room. I mean, but the point is, it's as good as the results that come into it. To me, that almost looks like a facade. And there you have the international election observers all sitting in there. If they're going to be, they need to be on the ground. But they cannot, A, get out there for one reason or another, which begs the question, why are they there? In USA, and I say this to USA, instead of empowering international election tourists, empower national civil society organization, young lawyers, young teachers, young nurses, young journalists. Empower them. allow them the instrument so they can get out, people like you, so you can go out in the field with your information and to provide the truth hands-on, respecting the protocols. That's where international money should be dedicated.
Mhm. Great. So before I finish, the party of President Kabila, they said in the statement that if this election is they trick the election, that the election was stolen from people who vote, they will mix the country. That means they'll bring trouble in the country. Do you see this election ending with civil war, or maybe a new rebellion group just created, advancing to Kinshasa, or to remove Joseph Kabila, to remove Felix Tshisekedi? Do you see this happen?
I hope not. I hope not. I pray not. I plead not. I mean, that is always, in a sense, when elections lack legitimacy, the person who did not win will say election fraud. You want to base the information on fact-based evidence, and you don't want to become emotional, which is why you want to have an EMB crafted and structured, professional, ethical, independent, to mitigate or to reduce what I call blowback, because the consequences are going to be far more than the actual cause. And I don't know. And I don't think anyone wants to have Congo retreating back into a state of chaos and anarchy. And there will be people that may try to inspire that. But I am pleading, and I will use your instrument to plead for what I call civility. Go through the process, respect the process, and hold power to account. And I will say this to the power: understand what I call your fiduciary role, that as a fiduciary, you are a servant, an agent of the citizen. It's not your money, it's public monies. And it's not for you to enjoy a good life. It's to assist your brother and your sister who lives with you in the country. Congo is potentially a, a state unique in Africa. It could be what I call the internal governor holding Africa together because of geography, because of resources, because of now population. Congo can export to the West culture, can export, when trained, a military to serve under the aegis of the United Nations, well trained, and as many other African countries have tried to do, but they need to put money into your people, the military. And then, of course, there's always what I call potential blowback. When you have the military well trained, they may turn on the government, hence the coups in the Sahel area. But there are other aspects. It's not quite a blueprint. And I always say, you respect and trust the people will trust and respect you. They can see. There's what I call the internal eye. And eventually the truth does come out. So I am hoping that the results, what they may be, will be respected. And if there is a disagreement, you go through the process. And I'm hoping that the incumbent president will understand this as well and will make every overture saying to open the books and saying, if I'm going to win, I want to win legitimately. And I want to make sure that my win is legitimate. And that will be in the interest of the nation state Democratic Republic of Congo, as with other nation states. So Congo, by rights, should be a beacon.
Hmm. Great. Monty, thank you so much for this interview. We hope to see you next time for another analysis. Thank you so much for your time.
I thank you very much, sir, and I applaud your work.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye-bye.
Dear viewer, thank you so much for being there watching this exclusive interview with Monte, who has 30 years of experience with dealing with election and crisis, mostly in Africa and the Europe country. We hope that you will be our guest for the next time. Thank you so much, and subscribe and share this video. Thank you.